Hi everyone. Just wanted to read you something that just truly blessed me when I was reading Nehemiah 4 verse 15. Um, I'm hoping that my time won't run out, so here goes. This is written by W. Clarkson. It's called The Wisdom of the Christian Workman in the Hour of Peril. We are reminded here of the progress of sin in its course. Verse 8. For sneers of the enemies of Israel passed on to plots, from taunts to a mischievous conspiracy. They conspired together to come and fight against Jerusalem and to hinder it. This advice of theirs was brought about by their hearing the walls of Jerusalem were made up, and steadfast labor of the good led incidentally to the development of evil in the unholy, the relations of David with Saul and the Apostle Paul with his unbelieving countrymen, and indeed those of our Master himself with the religious leaders of his day, show that speaking the truth or doing the work of God may prove the occasion of the growth and outbreak of sin, the occasion but not the responsible cause. We must not be deterred from speaking or doing the will and work of God by fear about incidental consequences on the part of the great enemy. The peril to the work of the church, verse 10, 11, and 12. The good work of Nehemiah was in serious danger from two causes: the craft and violence of its foes, and the faint-heartedness of its friends. The enemy said, They shall not know neither see, till we come in the midst of them and slay them, and cause the work to cease. Verse 11. Here was the force combined with subtlety. The enemy would surprise and slay them. The faint-heartedness of its friends. Judah, from whom better things might have been expected, said, The strength bearers, the burden is decaying. In verse 10. The neighboring Jews who had come in to help kept saying 10 times in verse 12 that we must return, fearing the wrath of the Samaritans. In every work of God, there are sure to be some, if not many, adversaries. 1 Corinthians 16 verse 9 says, For great door of effectual is opened unto me, and there are many adversaries. This we must expect wherever we put our hand to the plow in the field of Christian labor. And happy shall we be if we have not contended with the feebleness and, I don't know how to say that name, pusillanimity of our friends, fainting long before the reaping of time. Galatians 6:9, And let us not be weary in the well-doing, for in due season we shall reap, if we faint not, or even shrinking at the first alarm and talking about giving up. The wisdom of the church in the hour of danger. The first thing to do when the work of the Lord is threatened is that which Nehemiah did. Mindfulness to God. We made our prayer unto God in verse 9. Remember the Lord who is great and terrible, verse 14. An appeal to him for help, and the recollection of the fact that greater is he in us than all they that can be against us. Call upon me in the day of trouble, and I will deliver thee. Psalm 50 verse 15 says, And call upon me in the day of trouble, and I will deliver thee, and thou shalt glorify me. Realization of the great issues which are at stake in verse 14. Fight for your brethren, your sons, etc. When we are working or fighting for the cause of God and are engaged on behalf of the truest, highest, and most enduring interest of those who are dearest to us, and of our own also, the cause of Christ is the cause of ourselves, for our families, for our country, as well as for our race. The defense is in verses 16 to 19. We must fight as well as pray and work. Nehemiah's servant wrought their weapon of defense in one hand and their instrument of labor in the other, verse 17. Or while one was building, his fellow stood ready behind the spear to put at once to the laborer's hand. Usually, our work is rather to build than to strike. But there are times when we must be ready to fight our foes and aid those who are engaged in conflict. In the wide field of the church's work, there's always some work for the Christian soldier as well as for the Christian laborer. Let us, one, be the cheerful, appreciative cooperator with the other. The spear and the trowel are both wanted, the apologist and the preacher, the theologian and the evangelist are both accepted servants of Christ. Vigilance, verse 9. We set a watch against them day and night. The Christian motto must ever be the memorable words, watch and pray. Industry patient, in verse 21. We labored in the work from the rising of the morning till the stars appeared. United in verse 15, all of us, every one to his work. Self-forgetting in verse 23, none of us put off our clothes, etc. Order, verses 13, verses 19, verses 20 says, everything was done in perfect order. Men were placed here most required. Verse 13, whose homes were outside, came in. Verse 20, arrangements were made to concentrate in case of attack. Verse 19-20, all must work cordially under the human as well as under the divine leader. The next one is by J.S. Excel, The Work and Warfare of the Church. The weak of the church, derided and mocked by the Jews, verse 1. Underestimated the feeble Jews, verse 2. Misrepresented. If a fox go up, he shall break down the stone wall. Verse 3. Prayerful, hear, O God. Verse 4. Hearty, for the people had a mind to work, in verse 6. Advancing, heard the walls of Jerusalem were made up, and the breaches began to be stopped, in verse 7. The warfare of the church. Defensive, and conspired all of them together to come and fight against Jerusalem and to hinder it, in verse 8. We must be watchful, set a watch against the day and night. Judicious, I even set the people with their families. Verse 13, courageous, be ye not afraid, in verse 14. Religious, remember the Lord, self-denying, verse 23. In other words, be humble. Here's another one by R.A. Redford, on point as well. This description of the building of the wall of Jerusalem may be taken as representing the life of the church militant. The chief points are these: the spirit which pervades and actuates it. The people had a mind to work, active self-denial, fellowship, fortitude. The method, division, and distribution of the work, builders, fighters, burden bearers, some in command, others in waiting upon their word, a place for everyone in which to work, and everyone keeping his place and doing his utmost in it. The difficulty to do the work surrounded by enemies, their mockery, their defiance, their active opposition. Every earnest laborer must be prepared to resist. There is a special defenders of the faith, champions of truth, those who hold spears and shields and bows, and the corselets and the captains behind all the house of Judah. Besides these special fighters are builders, had everyone his sword girded to his side and built. All the people of God should regard the defense of his truth and be in protection of the life of his church and their vocation. We cannot know at what point the attack will be made. Let all put on the full armor, Ephesians 6. The ground confidence. We made our prayer unto God, and we set watch against them day and night because of them. Watch and pray. The true dependence is that which looks up to heaven and at the same time lifts up the hands, ready for activity. The victor over human infirmity. Some were discouraged, Judah said. The strength faileth. There is much rubbish. We are not able to build. The Jews nearest the danger were afraid. They were always in discontent, and fearful ones, provoking discouragement. But they are the Nehemiahs who look and raise up and speak. The true leaders remember the Lord. They encourage for themselves and for their brethren from the high places of faith and fellowship with God. The church should keep its eye on such men and ear upon them. The trumpet call. In what place ye hear the sound of the trumpet, thither assemble yourselves unto us. Our God will fight for us. There are times and places which rally God's people. They must draw together. They must forsake a while their special individual appointments. They must obey the trumpet which summons them to unite effort against the desperate assault. This especially true in connection with the attacks of infidelity and superstition. The universal requirements, unpausing, unresting toil, and vigilance till the work is done night and day. None of us put off our clothes. The church must endure hardness if it will accomplish its mission. Build the walls of Jerusalem. Special need at times to guard against the growth of the spirit of self-indulgence, sloth, and compromise. Guard against sin. We are the diamonds in the rough. Too much of the work is committed to the few willing laborers. All should be doing and always doing and doing their all for the Lord. I hope that truly blessed you. It did me, and I wanted it to share it with you all, so I rushed through it, but I hope that that will be a blessing to you. God bless you all, and thank you for listening. Have a wonderful, wonderful day. Till next time. Bye-bye.